Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazo.
Hey friends, thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome to the podcast. Can't wait to talk to our guest today, another troublemaker for the kingdom of God because he speaks the truth. It is Seth Gruber. The website is sethgruber.com. You're going to want to catch up with him. My goodness, this guy's been busy. The new project we'll be talking about today and directing you to is the 1916 Project.com, the 1916project.com. So Seth has been at this for a while. He's been a great voice for the life movement, and we can talk a lot more about that as we catch up with him. He's the CEO and founder of the White Rose Resistance and host of the Seth Gruber Show. Brother, so good to see you again. Thanks for your time.
You too, David. Appreciate your sharp mind and clarion voice in a insane, kooky, perverted, inverted, neo-Malthusian, neo-paganist, revivalist culture that's demonically inspired. And let's wake up the church, bro.
Yes, demonically influenced. And we're supposed to be the salt and light. We've talked about this many times in the past. And the church has to get back to that because right now we're looking all around. It's like demons are definitely influencing at least every institution. But there's an interesting quote, by the way. I just got an email within the last couple of days from you, not you personally, but your email that goes out. I love this quote in one of them. It says, "The church's job is not to tell people what they want to hear, but to speak the truth in a world of lies. If we want to see change, we need to speak up." And Seth, my goodness, what would our great-grandparents think if they could see today over $700 million of our tax dollars going to Planned Parenthood, butchering babies in mothers' wombs, and the kids getting surgeries, mutilating themselves, and hospitals going along with it, the government, Hollywood pushing this. It is really demonic. It is insane. But I just open up right now and just overall, before we get to the White Rose Resistance and the 1916. Did I say that right? Yeah.
Everyone does that. Everyone does that.
1916. Okay. All right. Go ahead. Go ahead. Roll.
Well, I mean, brother, what you said is so true. As a friend of mine says, unless the church flatulent becomes the church militant, it will become the church irrelevant. And by militant, I don't mean like pick up arms. I mean militant in your righteousness, militant in your fervor, in your zeal, to be as unapologetic and dogmatic for righteousness in the public square as the other side is for wickedness and evil ideas. And ideas have consequences, brother, and bad ideas have victims. And never has that seemed more true than in America in the last few years. And so I think most moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, lay Christians in the country right now are asking the question, what the heck happened to America? How did this happen? What happened to my country? And I think especially after 2020, I think a lot of Christians who were kind of in a apathetic reverie, they didn't care too much about what was happening in the broader culture as long as them and their family are okay, realize the consequences of abdicating from being involved in the public square. Teddy Roosevelt once said, "Those who say they have not time to attend to politics are simply saying they are unfit to live in a free community." This is America, okay? This is the land of the free and the home of the brave. It's a constitutional republic. We, the people, the three words that strike the most fear into the heart of the secular globalists at the World Economic Forum and the Democrat Party today. It means you have to steward the republic. You have to be involved if you want to be a bulwark between evil and the next generation to whom you will hand this country and the kind of country that they grow up into. This is big boy stuff. It's time to pull up our pants. But here's the thing, David. The other side has been contending for their ideology, worldview, and religion in the public square for so dang long now, David, while the church has been sitting on the sidelines under the spell of the Johnson Amendment, separation of church and state. I'm just going to tell people Jesus loves them, but not do anything to get involved. And so we've really handed over the country, the laws, the policies, the entire every institution of culturally formative power. And now we're like, how did this happen? What do you mean, how did this happen? We did this, okay? And so it's time to wake up. And so my film and book, The 1916 Project, answers a lot of those questions of how did we get here? What happened to this culture? Because if we want to change the country, we have to change the church. And if we're going to wake up the church, the people of God have to have knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. That's why God says, David, my people are being destroyed for lack of knowledge. We are being destroyed for lack of knowledge today. And if we want to stop that, we have to seek knowledge and understanding. This film will rip your face off. This book will fundamentally change the way you see the culture war, the country, ideologies, worldviews, and the broader culture of death that we're in.
Awesome. By the way, friends, the last time we had Seth on, we talked about the White Rose Resistance, and was it Sophie Scholl? Did I get that right? Sophie Scholl that started. Anyway, go to our search at worldviewmatters.tv. We now have a search function. Type in Seth Gruber, and you'll just watch that. We talked about the White Rose Resistance because we're going to talk about the 1916 Project. But Seth, a couple days after Father's Day this year, well, this is just recently, I'm looking at your Facebook page. And you've got a picture of you.
Do you still see the posts?
Yep. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like shadow banned like crazy on Facebook.
Me too. Oh, hello. You're preaching to the choir, bro. So you've got a picture of you and your kids at the airport. And you say, my greatest blessing are these three kids. After the long travel weeks, I'm reminded why I do what I do when I come home. I fight for truth, because they will have to live in the world that I leave behind one day, and being their dad is an honor. And Seth, I've often said, if you love your neighbor, Christian friend, you will not just be educated and informed, you will be mobilized, you will be activated, you will do something, you will engage the culture, not just voting, but actually exposing evil. Go ahead and share your thoughts before we jump into the 1916 Project.
Well, yeah, it's the family, brother. Every assault on the culture in the last about 100 years, from the kooky, weirdo sexual revolutionaries and architects of the culture of death in the 20th century, were all actually just attacks against the family. The family is the smallest political unit, right? So as goes the father, so goes the family. As goes the family, so goes the culture, right? And so the left has always hated God's view of the family. So did Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, David, who once said the marriage bed is the most degenerative influence in the social order. Anyone who believes that is a freaking idiot. But let's say evil. Some of these people have been very, very smart, but they've had a very evil agenda. And that agenda is our culture today. It's happened gradually for about 100 years, and now it's happened suddenly, and here it is, and we're blowing off the top of the hidden history of the secular moral revolution and the individuals that brought us to this point today. So the church will understand that this was fundamentally false religion the entire time.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought up Margaret Sanger. Thank you. I was going through some of the information that you put out. I like to always point people back about 100 years ago to the Birth Control Review, and you showed a lot of different covers on that. You can comment further on this in detail, but one of my favorites is a woman on her hands and knees chained to a big honking ball, and on that black ball, cast iron ball, it says unwanted babies. Go ahead, Seth. Go ahead.
Well, Margaret Sanger was a eugenicist, okay, which is far more sinister than just racism. Eugenicists believe that actually anyone, David, could be opened up to discrimination, because a racist, okay, would discriminate based off of melanin, right, or skin color. A eugenicist, and yes, Christian, if you're listening to this and you're thinking of Hitler, Mao Zedong, Mussolini, Pol Pot, Adolf Hitler, good job. Good job. You passed your history lesson. That's all eugenics. A eugenicist values people or devalues or rates them based off of genes or inherited characteristics. Okay. So eugenicists really hate, the mentally and physically disabled. They really don't like people with a history of alcoholism or criminal behavior. And then if there are poor minority groups that tend to not perform as well, quote unquote, in the broader society and culture as those eugenicists would define it, then they want those people to stop having kids. Or maybe they want to put them into sterilization camps. I'm not just spouting off here, by the way. Like, Sanger actually called for sterilization camps, and like concentration camps for people that she defined as quote unquote unfit. Okay, so eugenics is far more sinister and nasty than just racism. And eugenics always wears a different mask, right? Because the elite or the political elite get to define, like, what's the litmus test? What are the qualities that would make you valuable or not valuable, fit or unfit? And when you read Margaret Sanger's writing, she always uses these phrases: fit and unfit. And so the Birth Control Review, her magazine, which was Planned Parenthood's sort of magazine that drove its ideological formation for the first few decades. I have several of those copies from 100 years ago, original copies. They're very difficult to find. I know the one you're referring to. We have a picture of it in our film, The 1916 Project, but it really reveals a lot of her ideology and worldview and how she saw human beings. Okay, yes. She did not believe in the Imago Dei. She did not believe in God. She did not believe that rights come from God, which according to MSNBC recently, I guess makes you a Christian nationalist, whatever the heck that means. She once said, actually, the mast of her first magazine said, "No gods, no masters." It was her magazine called Woman Rebel. And there's a line in the first volume 1, article 1 of her magazine before she would found Planned Parenthood. And she said, "Our ultimate objective is unlimited sexual gratification without the burden of unwanted children." Boy, is that a great phrase that represents our culture today. I want to sleep with as many people I want. I want to feel good and accept no responsibility for my sexual choices. And so my contention in this book and film, which is the book is for pre-order right now, and the film, you can host this at your church right now before it gets released for the world later this year. My contention is this. Margaret Sanger is probably the most successful revolutionary activist leftist of the 20th century, whose fingerprints, if you will, or legacy on the insanity of 2024 and today's culture is greater than any other revolutionary of the 20th century, except maybe Alfred Kinsey. And don't worry, we talk about Kinsey in my film and my book. And my contention is that the year 1916 helped pivot American culture, from which so much of today's evil can be traced back to, maybe more than any other date in the 20th century. I know that's a heck of an argument to make, but we can talk about that in the rest of the program today, David. And you should go to the1916project.com. Press host a screening. And brother, sister, you can host a screening of this film at your church now. The only way people can watch it until it's released online later this year. It's a 75-minute full-length documentary featuring Eric Metaxas, Bill Federer, Pastor Jack Hibbs, Nancy Piercy, Jana Manchukwu, Bishop Wooden, and Dr. George Grant.
Wow. And I've been blessed to have some of them on this podcast. Love Jack Hibbs and Bill Federer. And my goodness, brother, I just love what you're doing. The 1916project.com. Crucial information, and for such a time as this. And the book, did you say it can be pre-ordered now? Is that right, Seth, over on Amazon?
That's right. You can pre-order it right now, but don't give your money to woke, baby-hating, Christian-hating Amazon. Go to the1916project.com, pre-order it from my ministry, and support a pro-life organization instead.
Great. Awesome. Good point. So before we get to the money that we're all donating generously, our taxpayers, to Planned Parenthood, I want to quote Allie Beth Stuckey, who was blown away by your project. She says, "When you realize the original thought leaders of every aspect of progressivism, abortion, Marxism, gender and sexuality, etc., were all mentally disturbed, sexually degenerate sociopaths, things really start to make sense. I watched Seth Gruber's documentary last night that maps out the connections between Darwin, the Nazis, Margaret Sanger, Alfred Kinsey, and many others. Absolutely fascinating, also empowering, as the doc highlighted opposing legacy of courageous Christians who have always stood against secular depravity. Every single person needs to watch this. The 1916project.com. Seth, how can we get more courageous Christians? Because the pastors, the pulpits they haven't been doing a great job of preaching the whole counsel of God and tackling some of these issues that our culture is suffering from. So how can we get more courageous Christians to get informed and speak on this? Go ahead.
Yeah, we had Allie at the kickoff for our church screening tour on June 14th. And I'll be having more special guests at my big screenings this summer. You can see those screening dates if you want to join us at one of them, Christian, at the 1916project.com and press attend a screening if you want to come hang out with us at the bottom of the website there. But yeah, what do we do? I mean, why won't the church wake up? Why can't we do something? You know, in First Chronicles, it talks about the sons of Issachar, and it says that the sons, that these were men who understood the times they lived in. And so they knew what Israel ought to do. It's a beautiful little tension there. But the flip side of that, David, is that if you don't understand the times you live in, you won't know what the people of God ought to do. The sons of Issachar were labeled as such because they understood the times. And it says they knew what Israel ought to do. The number one response I've gotten from Christians, as honestly, I don't know how I'm riding this wave. I mean, I do. It's a providential God thing, David. But I've probably been in more pulpits on the issue of pro-life. I mean, like entire 50-minute sermons, like in filling in for pastors around the country in the last 3 years than anyone else in the world who's spoken on this issue. And I'm only 32, and God's just really blessed this ministry. And the number one response I've gotten from believers across the country, as I've been all over this amazing country, is, Seth, I've never heard any of that before. In fact, my earthly hero, Pastor Jack Hibbs, I've been honored to be at his church several times, and we were there in January for a Happening Now conversation for 90 minutes. It has 300,000 views on YouTube, on his YouTube channel. I recommend you go watch it, Christian. But I asked his church, over 2,000 people were there that night. This is one of the most politically astute, informed congregations in America, because it's Jack Hibbs. And here's the question I asked to 2,100 believers at his church. I said, by raise of hands, how many of you have heard of the Supreme Court decision, Buck versus Bell? And there were 4 hands. It kind of proves my point that the Christians in America, at one of my favorite churches in the country, we don't know much about the culture that created this culture, the era that birthed this culture. Buck versus Bell was a Supreme Court decision that Margaret Sanger endorsed. And it was a 1927 Supreme Court decision that upheld a Virginia law from 1924. It basically, in an 8-1 decision, 8-1, the Supreme Court allowed the state to mandate the sterilization of human beings considered a threat to the gene pool. Eugenics, people that the political elites think shouldn't be reproducing, David. Like, we're so liberal and enlightened that we get to decide who gets to have children and who doesn't, who gets to live and who does, who gets to be held down on a table with their wrists and ankles strapped down to a table, David, and have her tubes tied, or hit little snip to the father, because you're not a good human being. You don't get to procreate. Do you understand what that Supreme Court decision did, Christian? Within 10 years, it's estimated that over 70,000 Americans were forcibly sterilized by the state. Okay, Margaret Sanger celebrated and endorsed that decision in 1927. And the Nazis at the Nuremberg trials, David, cited Buck versus Bell in their defense, as if to say, America, who are you to judge us? You were doing eugenics first. Okay, and if you pre-order my book, The 1916 Project, by the way, the subtitle is The Lying, the Witch, and the War We're In. If you pre-order the book, The 1916 Project, you will learn a lot more than what I just said about the connections, actually, between American eugenicists, most of whom were Margaret Sanger's best friends, board members, and donors and financiers, and how their work was actually the inspirational blueprint for what would turn into the final solution. Okay, so we don't know. My point is this: we don't understand the hidden history of the secular moral revolution. Even in politically astute, informed churches, we don't know that history. We've been lied to. And if they've lied to you about their patron saint, Margaret Sanger, what else have they lied to you about? And that's why in the summer of 2020, Planned Parenthood canceled Margaret Sanger. David, I don't know if you know this, because of pressure from BLM and the disciples of the 1619 Project, who say, you know, everything is racist, everything's racist. And so we have to cancel everything. But then because the revolution always eats their own, David, always.
Yes.
They put Planned Parenthood in their crosshairs, and they said, your founder was a racist. And for the first time in a century, Planned Parenthood canceled their Sanger, their founder. They took her name off their flagship Manhattan, New York City clinic that was called the Sanger Center. Okay, bro, it's called the Sanger Center. They renamed it. They canceled her. They treated her like one of their everyday victims. after carrying water for her and defending her for 100 years. Barack Obama got the Sanger Award. Nancy Pelosi got the Margaret Sanger Award. Okay. Now they don't give out that award anymore, and they canceled her and took her name off the building, which begs a very interesting question. And this is how I open my film in my book. If they've lied to you about their patron saint, what else have they been lying to you about? And what's the real story and history behind Planned Parenthood? Here's my last statement, David. Today, Planned Parenthood is not only the largest abortion provider in the world, they're also the largest provider of that pornographic comprehensive sexuality education.
Yes.
In the public schools, it's bringing those angry moms and dads to school board meetings. Planned Parenthood, largest provider of that education, David. And as of last year, they now announced, ready for this one? Planned Parenthood is now the second largest provider of cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers, chemically castrating transgender drugs for America's gender-confused youth. One organization is all three of those things. How did that happen?
Yeah, we understand their interest because that's their worldview. But we've got to take a brief pause with Seth Gruber. Again, friends, check out the1916project.com. We'll be right back on Worldview Matters.
Today's show is brought to you by Harbinger's Daily, world news biblically understood. Stay informed at harbingersdaily.com.
So, friends, a lot of people forget about the influence that our country has been dealing with. Karl Marx, Margaret Sanger, John Dewey, Alfred Kinsey, but we're exposing a little bit more of it today because we forget the details. Plus, the public school, the government-run school textbooks have been rewritten and edited, and true history it's hard to find anymore. But Seth Gruber, did Margaret Sanger once require or want to require parents get a certificate or permission in order for them to have children? Is that accurate?
Yes, that's right. You're a sharp guy, David. That's why I like coming on your program. Most people aren't even aware of some of Sanger's most indicting and damning quotes.
Yeah.
But no, that's actually exactly right. And she called for the mandated sterilization of lots of people. She once said, "I would suggest that the U.S. government pay a yearly pension to all paupers, morons, feeble-minded, mentally and morally deficient persons who will submit to sterilization." She said the government could fare better off. The government could far better afford to pension these members of society for doing a constructive thing than to pass them out a dole while they increase their numbers tenfold. She said just horrific things. And yes, one of those was to actually have a permission from the state as to whether you could reproduce or not, because she was a eugenicist. And she once said, eugenics without birth control seems to us a house built upon the sands. It is at the mercy of the rising streams of the unfit. So she referred to herself as a eugenicist, which is a term that was coined by Francis Galton, the modern father of eugenics. That's where that term comes from. Well, Galton's half cousin was Charles Darwin, whose book Origin of Species, Darwinism, right? So we came from animals, it's an animal kingdom. His cousin Galton reads his book, coins the term eugenics, and says, well, let's move from survival of the fittest to elimination of the unfit. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. In the same family, we moved from Darwinism to eugenics. And Sanger and all of her ilk were influenced by, respected, and celebrated people like Francis Galton.
Mm-hmm. Man, I wish we had more time, but let's just go to your website. There is a way for people to join the movement, host a screening, attend a screening, share the trailer. What else can people do, Seth, at the1916project.com?
That's right. Well, we do need your support, Christian. This was a massive undertaking, and we're doing a massive marketing campaign leading up to the online world release later this year. We're working on translations already. It's quite a big endeavor. We're now the fastest growing pro-life organization in America at just 2 years old, and we do need your support. This is building a movement with this film to then launch resistance chapters all around the country. We've already launched in Boise. We're launching in Denver. this summer, Southern California this summer, and Dallas, Fort Worth in the fall, of equipping and mobilizing Christians to contend politically through activism, events, educational, pushing back where they live to stop this insanity, because this is the role of the church. And so you can go to thewhiterose.life as well if you want to learn more about the organization, thewhiterose.life. If you join as an ally at $35 a month, you get a battle box in the mail to equip you for this fight. And at $70 a month, you join our Air Support book club. And so we read a book together once a month and talk about it live on Zoom. And sometimes the author shows up. So that's how you can support the ministry and the film to make it go viral. But if you want to host a screening at your church or attend a screening, yes, it's the1916project.com. And if you want to pre-order the book, it's the1916project.com/book.
This is important, friends, because we have been lied to, and our younger generations have been lied to in the public schools and the media and corporations. And here we are. We've got a truth proclaimer and defender here, Seth Gruber. I also want to direct you to the Facebook page, The White Rose Resistance. There's a Facebook page as well. And actually, Seth Gruber has a Facebook page if you want to connect with him there.
Yeah, we're everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Instagram. But Seth, you do great work, and I appreciate you because we don't have time to waste. You're a straight talker. Some people might be taken aback a little bit by your directness and forwardness, but I love you, brother, and I'm so thankful for you. You are helping pull down strongholds, and that's what we need to be a part of, because the enemy has taken way too much ground for way too long in America and around the world. I'll give you the last minute and a half to just share your thoughts and close.
Yeah, that's right, David. I mean, listen, Christian. Last month in June, the Texas Children's Hospital in Houston, Texas, was exposed by Chris Rufo at City Journal, who does yeoman's work, for violating Texas state law and continuing to do charging chemical castration of minors with transgender drugs to medicate against Texas state law. And last year they were exposed for continuing to do that to minors after they said they would stop. And now they've sent FBI Biden brown shirts to go knock on the doors of the two whistleblower doctors at that hospital who exposed what they were doing. Okay? And they're pushing for that doctor whistleblower a decade in prison. Same thing in Nashville. This month in July, pro-life sidewalk counselors from Nashville who were singing psalms out loud to Jesus outside of an abortion center and were kind of blocking access to the door, but not really. The Biden administration is pushing for a decade in prison for them. Listen, that did not happen accidentally. But take your clothes off at a pride rally and dance naked in front of children, and the police will watch on and do nothing. If you don't know what time it is yet in America, I don't know if you ever will. However, if you do need to know, or you want to awaken and equip others, read my book, The 1916 Project. Go pre-order it right now. It will give you all the power, talking points, confidence, and courage you need to be a voice in this culture of death. Because if we don't get the prophetic voice of the church soon, what we know is freedom and liberty will forever be gone.
Amen, brother. SethGruber.com, the1916project.com, the White Rose Resistance. Lord willing, we'll do this again in the near future. God bless you and keep expanding your territory and keep you safe, brother. Thanks.
Amen. You too.
All right. Friends, thank you so much for sharing the podcast. God bless you. And as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter.